Welcome, everyone, to today's Scaling with People podcast. I have Dave Sobel on the call. He is the host of Business of Tech podcast and owner of MSP Radio. He is regarded as a leading expert in the delivery of technology services with broad experience in both technology and business. Dave owned and operated an IT solution provider and MSP for over a decade, both acquiring other organizations and eventually being acquired. This firm was a winner of multiple awards, including being a finalist of Microsoft's Worldwide Partner of the Year in the Small Business Specialist category. And I know being a partner at Microsoft is very tough to get. So congratulations on that. After his MSP experience, he has worked for multiple vendors at such companies as Level Platforms, GFI, Logic Now, and SolarWinds, leading community, event, marketing, and product strategies, as well as several M&A activities. The Business of Tech is a leading IT services focused on news and analysis podcast and YouTube show with thousands of listeners and subscribers. You should definitely check it out. He also co-hosts of the podcast Killing It. And I think it is IT, right? Killing IT. Is that right, Dave?
It's both at the same time. It's killing it, but also implying IT.
I love it. That's so great. And you're an author of the book, Virtualization Define. Dave was a CRN channel chief on the CRN UK A-list, a channel Futures Circle of Excellence winner, one of Channel Pro's 2020 visionaries, and has a MSP Mentor 250 member for multiple times. Dave, you're going to have to explain all of that. Woo, that was a lot. And he's also recognized as one of the top virtualized experts globally as Microsoft MVP for virtualization. Dave has served on the Executive Council for Managed Services and Emerging Technologies, the Vendor Advisory Council, as founding chair of the Mobile Community for CompTIA. Okay, you got a lot of great technology background. I can't wait to dive into this. So how are you doing today?
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm great. And the summary of that is I've got enough gray hairs on delivering technology to be able to actually speak with some insight. Let's just summarize it that way.
I love it. Okay. All of that in like a one sentence piece. That's great. So tell me, I mean, IT, wow, we're in a ever changing landscape. And obviously the hot tool and the hot thing that everyone's talking about is AI technology. Tell me a little bit about it from your perspective.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time, right? And I'm one of those guys, I've been doing it long enough to know that we watch a lot of these cycles come and go, right? We've had lots of buzzwords in our space. A few managed to last. Cloud computing, one that has actually been something. But for every cloud computing, there's crypto, there's the metaverse, there's 3D printing, there's a whole bunch that don't necessarily become anything of it. What's interesting to me, what's happening in AI is for those of us that have been studying this is not a new trend. We've been actually working on AI technologies for decades, and we've seen some progress in it. What actually really happened was the release of ChatGPT coming out, making the public really aware of one subset of AI called generative AI. And these leverage these large language models, which is just a buzzword you need to know, of like a really complicated, interesting database of words. And they leverage that in order to do some really interesting things on a communication perspective. And ChatGPT kind of took off. And what was interesting is the reason we're all fascinated by it is because it became one of the fastest consumed consumer tech products of all time. Blew away, Facebook launch, Instagram launch, like in terms of its adoption, and it just really exploded. And people got to see the power of what these things can do, but also some of the implications of what they can do, because they're really able to process information. And it's much smarter than a search engine, because it's not used for that. What it's actually doing is doing some math and predictive analysis to guess what it should say next to essentially fill in the blank. But that means, based on its really, really large amount of information and what we can get into these modern ones, that it can be very insightful and interesting and kind of creative.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you see it starting to weave its way into the business world?
Well, the idea behind what we're able to do with a lot of these technologies now is that we can actually make people smarter. That's been really the big push is augmenting people. And if you look at some of the branding we've seen from the big tech companies, I like Microsoft's best. Microsoft has been talking about their technologies as Copilot. And the idea is that they're going to give you this artificial intelligence companion or technology built into the tools you already use that let you do things faster. So for example, the idea now is you can take a Word document and say, make this into a 10 slide PowerPoint presentation. And it'll take all the information, it'll spit out a first version, or rewrite this in the sound, the tone of Stephen Hawking, or rewrite this in the tone of, or I want this to be funnier, or make this more serious, or tighten this up. And it can rewrite and retake the information you've given and make it more useful. And you can kind of see how that would be really helpful for a lot of professionals, like in the kinds of work that they're doing. And if we can automate away some of the more difficult tasks and make people to be able to produce more stuff, theoretically, we can heighten productivity. Now, of course, there's some implications here that we have to make sure that we're using it in smart ways. And we're already seeing people get into some kinds of trouble. You may have heard of the story of the lawyer who asked ChatGPT to do an analysis on a legal brief for them and give and make a filing for them. Well, the ChatGPT diligently went off and did the work and completely made up a bunch of case law because it was just guessing on what it was. And so this lawyer then submitted all of that and got into a little bit of trouble with the judge when none of the case law was actually real.
Yeah, so that totally goes to, you can trust it, but make sure you verify it, right? Like I always say, it's a great tool to go from a blank page to a draft, but you should always be reviewing it, whatever it spews out, whatever it gives you, and verifying, especially if you're talking about legal, compliance, HR related items, finance related items, right? Like you shouldn't be just like, okay, perfect, let me submit and I'll move on to something else.
And what we're finding is the people they're learning to navigate this are being really effective with it. And interestingly, it's actually boosting mid-tier performers more than anyone. The top performer already pretty good at their job, right? So they're not necessarily going to be getting a lot of incremental benefit, but someone who's a mid-level performer who can leverage it effectively is actually now starting to accelerate and outperform. One of the more recent tests that I saw is they put somebody on a help desk, and they were able to find that they were able to make the 2-month employee the same as the 6-month employee. Pretty great boost, right? Because you're able to help somebody come on and become better at the job faster by using that. We're seeing really interesting applications in healthcare where we can provide doctors with a lot more information that they can then process, and that they might not have been able to see all of that information at the same time. They can be given lots of ideas and things they might not have known that they can do the analysis on. Another great example of where we're seeing practical applications is in pharmaceutical research, where they're actually able to take the entire universe of possibilities, and the models will spit out and say, here's the top 600 or so compounds to test. Well, turns out the answer was in those 600, right? So they're able to actually start getting to answer faster. But you're exactly right. The key to success was making sure the humans were still in the loop there.
Exactly. Human in the loop. I think that's going to become a new terminology that you'll hear more often with AI getting involved into businesses, right? I know that there's a lot of people out there that are very concerned that their job is going to be taken away by AI. But I think if we really look at it, it's about the fact that it's going to improve your capability to be able to upskill your own self, right? And you're no longer doing all this administrative stuff down here. And you're now doing more strategic stuff, more thinking outside the box, being innovative, being creative. It's going to be interesting to see the shift.
And what we're not even necessarily seeing yet is the kinds of jobs that it will create, new roles based on the kinds of data that's available or augmentation. I think you're exactly right. The one thing I'd say is I don't think an AI is going to replace you. I think you're much more at risk of being replaced by someone who understands AI.
Yes. I would agree with that. Yes.
and I think that's the real risk for people is I don't think this is a trend you can completely ignore. And I think it's about applying the technology in the right ways. And what I think the actual interesting opportunity for everybody is in figuring out the frameworks and applying them in your business. So I think you want to actually think about, we talked informally, right, just a moment ago, saying like, well, you got to make sure the human reviews that stuff. Well, that's actually being codified by some organizations that we look at. You can see two very recent examples that I think are really valuable for us. Most recently, the AP has put out their guidance for journalists that they are allowed to use AI and they are encouraged to experiment with the technologies, but they're not allowed to use it as a first-person source. They're not allowed to submit something that is entirely AI generated. They have to leverage it as a tool for writing, not a replacement. Or the other example that I think is great is we're just coming off of the writers' strike, being settled. Interestingly, the same kind of terms that they can't use. Writers can't be replaced with AI generation. The studios can't tell them what tools to use, but writers are allowed to use it. But AIs can't get writing credit. It's like these useful frameworks. And so for your audience, particularly as business owners that are thinking about this, now is the time to spend some time thinking about the frameworks in your organization of the way you're going to bound this. I'm not recommending people say not at all. What I am saying is to put some rules of the road down and work with your technology provider if you need to define those rules so that your people are empowered to experiment and be more productive.
I think that's such a key thing too, right? Making sure that you're putting down the rules so people understand what game they're playing and how to play it, and be able to be the MVP of that game, right? And so I want to go back to your statement earlier of how the trend is that it's improving your middle level individuals, the middle performers. I'd be curious to see where the data is on that, because when I think about it as an executive, I think it's improved my work tremendously, because I'm now being able to have drafted communications, drafted policies, drafted job descriptions, writing. I do a lot of writing. I'm a math major, by the way, so that is not my wheelhouse, but I've gotten so much better. And then now AI has improved it. And now it takes 20% of the time because AI is doing 80% of the lift for me.
And by the way, I had the same experience. That, is that I use it in a lot of things, and I go, wow, I can really create a lot of stuff a lot faster now because of my use of it. But in terms of what I mean is in broadly, when they're doing studies of who are seeing the greatest gains, they're seeing it in those that are in this mid tier. That if you are good at your job, it will definitely make you better. You can produce more. But if you are in that mid range where you're a mid tier performer, and by the way, that's okay, right? A lot of solid B performers really make a business perform.
Yeah.
But if you can give them those tools and you can actually, boost their capabilities a little bit more, and then get that best bit out of a very reliable B player, and we're seeing the most gain there because they'll get additional insights that they might not have had before, or they may have had new ideas, or the ability to brainstorm or bounce off, that creativity. Like that's where we're seeing a lot of really great, organization-wide gains.
That's awesome. So with a few minutes left here, I'd love to get your thoughts on, or maybe some recommendations as a startup founder or CEO who may only have 5 people, 10 people, obviously a couple different levels and lifespans of a startup. What are some tools that you're seeing startup companies start to implement to help them with putting in processes and putting in practices to help them be able to move quicker with less people and less costs?
So I'm actually going to pivot that a little bit and say, because I'm less about recommending a tool and much more recommending a system. There are companies that in my space, like these managed services providers, IT services companies, that are literally dedicated to helping small companies leverage technology better. So my system advice is you need to have somebody who is your technology advisor. And by the way, you can hire an organization that does that part-time on your behalf. That is an actual thing. You can have that at your bits. The same way that you can outsource levels of HR and payroll and tax accounting. You can have a virtual technology officer at your table there that is part-time with you through a company. And I want you to be very deliberate on your choices of technology so that you actually do tie that back to the business outcome. It's really easy for somebody like me, particularly gadget and tech guys, to immediately go to like the tool or the thing I want you to buy. But what I actually want you to do is start looking at your technology as an investment, and you want to tie it back ideally to driving your top line revenue. How can we deliver a little bit more top line revenue in your business through the use of technology? That's my best model. Now, it's better. It's not quite as best, but it's better if we can actually tie it to cost reduction. We make your cost of goods sold better. Like, that's a good thing if we can make your people a little bit better. But you should very much tie your technology spend to business outcomes in your business. And as technologists, that is totally something we can do. We can actually talk to you about the fact that the way we're going to use technology and the way we're going to measure that success, it's a thing. And for those small startup businesses, I want you to keep that in the back of your mind, that you should be asking that question.
I love that. And it's so interesting because as I continue to do podcasts and meet wonderful people like you, there's this reoccurring theme that happens. And it's what you just said, recognizing that you can get us resources that don't have to be full-time and that are maybe not even in your wheelhouse, and let those people who are subject matter experts lead that section of your business so that you can focus on what you need to do, which is, it might be building the product, it might be getting the revenue, it might be working with investors, a combination of that. So I love that. Great advice to all those that are listening that are founders and CEOs of startups. You don't have to do it all. You shouldn't do it all. Get some experts in-house and let them really boost you up.
It's exactly that. And so that's another key part of your virtual leadership team, is there are technology people to help you with that. And they should be able to measure their work with business outcomes.
This has been a fun conversation. I can't believe how quickly we've gone. I feel like we could talk for hours on end. Is there anything else, one last tidbit or one last piece of advice that you want to throw out there to the founders in the world?
I will give one other little tidbit of advice from somebody that spends a lot of time in technology and in cybersecurity. You're going to want to make sure you invest in good backups and invest a little bit of money in some security. I know I hate spending money on security because it's much harder to tie back to those outcomes. But let me tell you, as a technology person, the one thing we cannot restore to your business is your own intellectual property and data. Those are the crown jewels, and it is worth the money to protect that. Because everybody tells me, particularly in small business, well, I don't have anything of value. Hackers aren't coming for me. Yes, you do. That you have your data, which they are very good at systematically taking hostage. So spend a little bit of time to protect that information with some good backups. A technology advisor can help you, but please spend a little bit of time and effort there, because that's the one thing we can't get back from a technology perspective, is your data.
That is so good. I appreciate that. That's really good advice. I hope everyone that listens to this takes that to heart. And even for those that may not own a business or own that decision, taking it to heart in your personal life with your own personal computer, your own photos, right? I can't tell you, my mom just lost a bunch of photos because her hard drive crashed and now they're gone. So
and they're gone. And we cannot get
those
that back. We can get everything else back. We can get you a new phone. We can get you a new computer. We can get you back up and running. Right. The one thing we cannot get back is your data, and you need to protect it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Dave, so much for your time. I've learned a lot, and I hope that those listening have as well, and appreciate your insight into today's AI world.
Guerrero, thank you so much for having me. This has been great fun, and I really do appreciate it. And I'm here to help if anybody needs it.
And for those listening, if you want to know more about technology or get more help, I highly recommend that you start listening and following the Business of Tech podcast done by Dave. Thanks, everyone. Bye.